like, the whole Roe v. Wade thing, abortion that's out right now. Obviously, like the church has a unified point on that, but is there also like behind the scenes, like, hey guys, here's how we're going to address this, here's how we're going to do that, or again, is it just everyone's autonomous? And
this is a difficult issue, and I think it's one that's evolving.
Mhm.
Again, here I don't want to say too much because people feel very, very strongly about this one way or the other.
Yeah.
What I will say is voting is a 200-year-old institution. And, back in the day, you had an emperor, you had a king, you had a dictator, and they decreed. And when they said something and you didn't like it, they killed you, and that was the end of that discussion, right? And you have the United States where, this is 200 years old. And so as Christians, I don't think we have any guidance really on how the church is meant to interact with power.
Mm.
We've seen, bad things in history, right? We've seen what happened in the Roman Empire when, the Pope would crown the emperor, right? And the corruption that happened in the Latin church, especially in the medieval times, or the Middle Ages, it's bad. And church and politics don't mix. And sometimes we take our eye off the ball when we start focusing on policies and senators and legislation and Supreme Court. The church is a hospital, and its primary job is its patients. Now, if the hospital wants to put out a public service message and say, smoking is bad for you, feel free to run a billboard, right?
Yeah.
But if a patient walks into your hospital and you say, hang on, I'm too busy putting up billboards, and then the patient sits in the waiting room and dies, then we've done something wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, we have to be careful, that I'll take it a step further, right? I mean, the church has always existed in a hostile environment, right? I mean, starting from Nero burning down Rome,
Mhm.
right? We've been persecuted, Islam, the Roman Empire, communism, right? The church is persecuted, and it kind of does well when it's persecuted, right? It doesn't need to be in a Christian country. In fact, every time it is in a Christian country, there's a lot of mix of politics and religion. And it's dangerous, right? So, we came from a country in Egypt where you can marry 4 people. Okay, that's nice, but that's not my law, right?
Mm.
So the church's law is always above the law of the land, right? So if I move to some country in Africa and they say, you can kill people here. Okay, well that's nice, but I'm not going to kill because my law is above that, right?
Right.
And so it isn't necessarily my objective to change the law of every country I go into to make it look like a Christian country, because these laws, I mean, what's the purpose of a law? I mean, is it morality? No, right? I mean, marijuana is legal, judging each other is legal. As long as you're 18, you can sleep around with as many people as you want. That's legal, right? So what's legal isn't what's moral. Those are totally different things, right? So, and you're a lawyer, right? So, I mean, the purpose of the law isn't to make us good people, right? So I don't necessarily have to, go after this and say, well, I mean, like look what happened when marijuana passed, right? A bunch of youth go, well, it's legal now, so I can do it.
Yeah.
And you're like, but that isn't the measure, right? It doesn't matter if it's legal or not. I mean, it's legal to be drunk in my house 24 hours a day. It's legal for me to judge and hate your guts and hate you as long as there's no assault or battery.
Mhm.
That's legal. Okay, but as a Christian, it isn't okay, right?
Right.
So I'm not deriving my morality and my faith from the law. Law says I can do lots of things, right? But that doesn't make it right, you know. So getting caught up in this, you lose a lot of peace. The church loses focus if it starts getting too involved in politics. And so we have to be careful. We're a hospital. and there are a lot of sick people in the pews, right?
Hmm.
And people need help, and people need love, and people need a hand, and there's people in there, her husbands left them, and her kids are suicidal, and her kids are on drugs, and her marriages are about to break up, and who are just diagnosed with cancer. There's people with real problems, right?
Yeah.
And you walk into church and say, here's a law, we need to focus on Senator X because he's voting for Proposition Y. It's like, whatever, bro, I've got cancer, and my
Yeah.
kid on meth, and I need help. I need God. I need you to hold my hand. That's what I need, you know.
I agree with that, but don't you think this law in particular, and we don't have to keep going into this, but don't you think this one's a little bit unique because
Sure. I
it,
mean,
just
abortion is murder,
right.
as far as I'm
So
concerned. But even having said that, even the church as a whole doesn't want. I mean, the Coptic Church allows abortions in certain circumstances.
mhm.
They just do. So the church may not actually want abortion to be banned
Yeah.
because there
I'm
are
glad
certain.
you said that, by the way, because I've heard it said so many times that there are no circumstances. I'm like, there are definitely circumstances just because of the concept of like economia, right? Like there
Well,
has to be.
I don't want to speak on his behalf, but His Eminence has said this publicly.
Yeah.
There are certain, the life of the mother, and not necessarily just the physical, but the emotional, psychological health. I mean, there are circumstances where the church grants abortions,
Yeah.
right? So it isn't always in our best interest to say, let's be in a country that has banned it completely.
Right. So
Um,
just
yeah.
like putting that issue aside, but just in general, when there are uh, social, moral, political issues, if the church doesn't necessarily need to, be in the civic arena, voicing our positions, what about internally? I feel sometimes we kind of just shy away or ignore the topic in general, and let's just focus on uh, the next Sunday school lesson. What are your thoughts on that? Should we like be addressing these issues head on, or is it just teach the people the theology, the faith, and they'll understand these things? They'll understand the right kind of position naturally, because this isn't something that like we have a quote from Saint John Chrysostom. He said, the first trimester it's okay, but the second no. Like we don't have that, right? So
I mean, okay, so you're back to abortion. I mean,
well, no, I mean this could be about anything, just like whether
no.
it's like abortion, legalizing drugs, whatever the issue is, the topic of the day. Should we engage in this war, whatever? Um, Maybe the church, like I said, doesn't need to be in the civic arena voicing itself to politicians and such, but what about internally?
I think as an individual, you should vote, your morals, and you should vote your conscience, and you should,
Hmm.
um, and so I think that, certainly the church and the individual. I mean, as an individual, you could do whatever you want. You want to vote for a particular party, and you want to vote for, you want to, help this one person run for office. Absolutely, like, and I think we're called as Christians to have a civic duty and to be engaged to a
Hmm.
certain degree in the country in which we live in. Um, the church, I would say, less so, right? Because again, politics and hierarchy just shouldn't mix like that. But how you vote and why you vote. Um, I mean, I honestly don't want to go out on a limb here too much because I don't think this is something that we've thought thoroughly through. Um, as a community, right? I mean, I think voting is new to us as Orthodox. And, the fathers haven't talked about this. The Bible certainly hasn't talked about this. And I think we need to have a more thorough internal discussion first and kind of think about, well, what is the role of voting, in a country, even as an individual?
Mm.
What should I be voting for? And I think the party line right now is, well, you vote your morality, and you vote your conscience, and you vote what you think is right. Um, which is, fine if that's the approach that people want to take, that's fine. But my contention is this hasn't been debated enough. I think we need to think a little bit about it, because also, we just came from a country where religion is infiltrated in the law, and it's not nice, right? I mean, in Egypt, Islam is part of the law, and we left there with a really bad taste in our mouth about Islam because of that. And in this country, there's a really bad taste in the mouth of most people about Christians for that reason, and so we also have to be careful. We're walking into, there's a lot of crazy people out there who said a lot of crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why a lot of people don't like Christians in this country. Good reasons, when we can get all self-righteous and say, well, that's because we're light and they're darkness, and our light repels their darkness, and that's why they don't like us. You can say that all you want, right? But they're not reacting to that. Like you said earlier, people have a good sense, right? And so when you're being a hypocrite and you're being hateful and you're using the Bible as a weapon against people can feel that, right? It's like, and you say these quaint little things like, oh, well, we love, the sinner, but we hate the sin, and then you look in that person's face and they're looking at whoever they're looking at in a very hateful way. It's like, you don't love the sinner, bro. Like, don't try to snow me. And we're just saying that. So we have to be careful, right? Because there's a context here in the United States, right? The pendulum is swinging, and there's a reason why it's swinging. There was a lot of use of the Bible as a weapon against people.
Yeah.
In many ways.
I think these past few years have been very revealing, as people have tossed away friendships over disagreements. It's been very sad to see. I'm sure all of us have experienced that to some extent, and that's, I think, when we stop seeing the other person as just another human, and we're just seeing right past them.